We're in Adelaide. Adelaide's a big AFL town, I guess, but this is much broader than sport. It's about, I guess, team sport in Australia. But sport, in AFL and rugby and some of the big elite professional sports, there are a few opportunities to really distinguish yourself and seek a competitive advantage. If you just focus down on AFL, for example, we've got a draft and we've got rules around player movement that regulate where players can and can't do, and to make sure talent is spread fairly evenly. And we have a salary cap to make sure that the really wealthy clubs can't stockpile all the good talent. There's a range of other measures that are in place to make sure we sort of compete at very even levels and high levels of competitive balance. One of the few areas where you can, I believe very strongly, get a strong competitive advantage is in the ability of your people, their experience, their talent, their commitment. And that's not rocket science. That goes with most organisations. Most organisations can't outperform without really, really good people. And to get good people, you've got to have a very broad and deep talent pool to choose from. And once again, not rocket science. You've got lots of people to choose from. More likely than not, you're going to get the better talent, providing you make good decisions. Now, the experience with Richmond, and I think with AFL, and I would imagine with most male-dominated elite professional sports in Australia, that we aren't drawing from a deep and broad talent pool, because women, particularly at senior levels of leadership that influence policy and planning and strategy, are underrepresented. So that's the experience. And that's an experience that I'm all too familiar with when I, as the CEO of our club, we go to market to fill new positions in senior leadership on our executive and marketing or the commercial or consumer aspects of our business. More often than not, when we get to the last 3 or 4 candidates for that position, there'll be no women. There'll be no women. And that's not because of talent, it's clearly not. It's because they're not represented. And I was always curious, because I always thought that our footy club and most football clubs and most sporting ones, they're reasonably progressive and made up of decent people. And I just wondered, what is it that's preventing women from being represented at these higher levels? Now, I picked up gender equity before about being key to sort of cultural performance. There's internal and there's external dimensions to this. From an internal point of view, I'm a great believer that if you've got people from different backgrounds, with different skills and different experiences and different ways of seeing the world and different lived experience, and you come together to look at issues or problems and make decisions, when you've taken into account a whole range of different perspectives, more often than not, the decision will be a better one or an optimal one, rather than just a blinkered, narrow perspective. So which better decisions lead to a better performance, a better business. And in fact, there are studies by McKinsey's, a very reputable management consultancy firm, and there's a big Gallup survey of 800 companies, that companies or teams in particular with high degrees of gender diversity typically perform a lot better, a whole range of different metrics, which I won't bother you with. So that's the internal dimension. The external dimension is that I work at a football club and in the AFL, but sport in this country is so much more than just sport. It's a form of leisure, it's a form of entertainment, and it's a form of entertainment. And so we need to make sure, to grow our customers and grow consumers of our stuff, of our products, that we need to reach new markets and new people. And so if when seeking to reach new markets and new people, messages are coming from people that look like me all the time, or I'm crafting the message ain't going to be a good one, and certainly not going to be reflective of the changing nature of Australian society. I mean, clearly gender's 50-50 across it's always been there, but our country's becoming increasingly multicultural as well. So there's both internal and external dimensions. So just some more stats on the current Richmond experience. Example, our membership database, female members are underrepresented, and our members are very important, not just consumers, they're stakeholders in our club. We've got 29% of an executive team of 7. We have 2 women on that executive team, including one Indigenous female as well, for what it's worth. Board positions, 29% of our board positions are held by females. We have a board of 9, and we have 2 on the board at the moment, including one president, the first president in the history of VFL-AFL football, Peggy O'Neill, which I'll touch on a little later. But importantly, we run an annual culture and climate survey at our club to just take the temperature of the organisation, and we've been talking about this subject for a while, and you can tell that there is, I guess, a strong emphasis or strong understanding of wanting to take a lead role in gender equity and knowing more about it, and of our involvement in a gender equity project, which you'll hear this reference a couple more times, which I'll touch on in a second as well. So I guess what I'm trying to say there is we are very curious about this. We want to engage women across all aspects of our business, both in and out. We want to engage women at senior levels of our business. We want to understand what are the obstacles preventing them from doing so, and we haven't got all the answers. We haven't got all the answers, and I think those stats just highlight we've got a lot of work to do. So I don't want to appear self-righteous, etc., etc. So we sat down and we come up with a whole sort of multifaceted strategy. How do we engage women in our business? From the consumption point, from retail, from membership, how we present our events, etc. But the key piece of this, and this is what I want to talk to you about today, is we wanted to come up, I guess, with a really good, acute, and to a certain extent, empirical understanding of what is it that it prevents women from getting into leadership roles at elite sport and AFL, particularly from where I sat. The intentions were very, very sound. And so we went to the Sports Commission, and so we're very mindful of your agenda, the Sports Commission, and trying to engage women, and from broadcasting and across all the sport, and so this is the project we want to run. It's quite a narrow focus. It's about elite sport. It's about senior leadership positions. We'd be happy to sort of conduct some sort of research project, and I'm sure you'd be happy in taking the findings. Our industry can use those findings and apply them as they see fit. The Sports Commission can as well. They decided to support it, as did the AFL, because I think from the AFL it made sense for them to have a pilot club to reveal ourselves, and but also knowing the clubs are where the jobs are. There's 18 clubs, there's say 100, 120 employees at each club, and it's probably where some of the attitudes are most entrenched, in some of those blockages, which I'll get to later. A bit on the methodology. So it simply consisted of some in-depth interviews, about 6 in all, by a consultancy company who sat down with people within our club, only a few, within the industry, at other clubs, at AFL, and within our industry, at other elite sports. And I guess to get a sense from their, perspective, barriers, real or perceived, preventing women getting to senior leadership. The second part of that was to sort of collate all those and come up with a series of themes, which I'll touch on in a second. And then, from our point of view, once we saw those themes, to sit down quite nervously and say, what the hell are we going to do about it? What are we going to do to try and, having regard to these obstacles and themes, to try and actually change things and make some commitments? And I guess the final, which we're going through at the moment, and the final part is evaluation in 2016. So ideally we'd like to look back and say in 2016, this is what we identified, this is what we did with it, and this is, the performance dividend that we experienced in our business. Hopefully, we may not. We'll have to wait and see. But I think importantly, we've put ourselves on the hook. So firstly, some of the themes. I'm getting a drink of water from someone, if possible. Is there someone in the back of the room I could... Oh, thanks. Great. The first one is the first barrier, perceived or real. And once again, there's a lot of things in here that which you'd all would appreciate and be aware of. But I think we just... Thanks, Katrina. This is... we're identifying them and we're calling them out. And the first one is a lack of a genuine equity mindset. And the facts are that sport has been a heavily masculine sort of culture in this country for about 100 years. I mean, once again, that's not rocket science, and it's traditional, it's cultural, it's systemic, and it's reinforced through symbols and narratives and recruitment and networks and bias and conscious and sometimes just outright discrimination. And just borrowing one of the quotes, which I'll refer from time to time, before I go on, this is the report. I come with the props. This is the report, and this has been distributed broadly through the for the AFL network. It's available on the Richmond Football Club website, richmondfc.com.au, and we'd encourage all of you to sort of take this and read it, and particularly the guys, because you'll find a lot of it quite confronting. So, just borrowing on one of the quotes, you know you've made it as a woman in footy when you've learned to stand up and pee. It's true. Because there's no alternative offered at the grounds. So, I mean, that's just an illustration of, I guess, a lack of an equity mindset. And I guess the alternative is a genuine mindset that men and women share sport. A genuine mindset that both men and women share sport, and that can hardly be said at the moment. And importantly, changes in fostering a genuine equity mindset, at first instance, can be symbolic to generate momentum in some of these male-dominated elite sports, such as just equal gender representation on marketing brand collateral. A situation in Richmond a couple of years ago, we run a moderately successful business network luncheon series. We have 2 or 3 lunches a year with really reputable guest speakers, but we'd reached a threshold and it wasn't growing. And we were surprised at the lack of women that often come along when we had really, really good speakers, male and female. But in some of the advertising collateral, it was just images of men sitting around in suits and ties, talking business sort of stuff. And so a very, very simple, symbolic illustration. The same size trophies. I've got young sons and daughters that play sport. The little boys get the big trophies often, and girls footy, they might get the smaller inferior trophies. Prime time slots in junior sport. Young boys may get preferential treatment when it comes to the better times. Certainly amenities. A lot of facilities don't have proper amenities, such as toilets, etc. And ensuring that sometimes the mums or the women run the skills or drills, and the dads organise, tuck shop, whatever the case may be. So that's a theme. That's theme number 1, the lack of an equity mindset. Excuse me a second. The second theme was the right kind of support. And I think what a lot of the people who participated in this survey identified was, there's some really, really good men out there that are progressive and support and mentor and look out. But it's a form of support that almost seeks to protect women, from the tough and uncompromising and the combative nature of sort of elite sport, particularly football. And just picking up a quote. In football, there's a high value placed on a work style within football that rewards volume of effort and an absence of critical commentary. Grind through it, get on with it, just fit in, don't carry on, put your head down, stop talking about yourself, do whatever it takes when you're told. So this is a style that can easily position women as not aligned to the culture of football. If those women are balancing commitments outside of work, for example, or if those women attempt to raise concerns about gender equity, heaven forbid. So the right kind of support is examining the environment and say, is the tough, combative, sort of uncompromising environment right in 2015 for managing elite professional sport? Is that environment right in the first place? And this was fairly confronting for me. This I guess revealed a sense of my unconscious bias. So the right support is support for the normalisation of a discourse that is about women and merit and not about women and need. Another theme was recognising the stress of the status quo. And clearly, women don't have weight in numbers, and that can be very taxing. It can be isolating for the most resilient of women in AFL football and elite sport as well. Another one was the women's brand in football. Men tell the story of sport in this country. And I don't think enough focus has been put on sort of the role of our broadcasters but even our public broadcaster, the ABC. And we will all be aware of significant budget cuts and which will impact the way women's sport is broadcast in this country. So it mightn't be a barrier to gender equity within a footy club per se, but it's not going to help you engage women as well. So the facts are there's an extraordinary underrepresentation in sport, in women in the story of sport, and it's a huge growth opportunity, I think, for broadcasters and for our code. Many women lamented the fact that much of the impetus for change on gender equity and inclusion is left to women, and that can be taxing, and really it's men that in our sport and a lot of the elite sports in this country that do hold the positions of influence and power that can actually do things and intervene and make positive change. And so men, have a very important role to play in sort of challenging and disrupting the status quo. And I'll get onto an exciting project we're working on in a second. So that's a barrier, the fact that so much is left to women, and when it's the men, I guess, in positions of power and influence. If I could boil, I guess, all the themes of obstructions down into one, it'd probably be something like this. And Liz Broderick, who's a Sex Discrimination Commissioner, a very, very impressive woman, summed it up in one very powerful quote. She said, "You can't be what you can't see. You can't be what you can't see." So if you're a very capable and experienced and ambitious female, and you've got a senior role in business development at a bank or a marketing company, whatever the case by me, and you're considering a role in sport, and you don't see women prospering, progressing in elite sport, you're not going to see that as a valid pathway. So you're not going to make the plunge, and which is a real loss, because this is not just about AFL football, this project. This is much broader. Because, I love sport, and I think sport offers so much to our country, both socially and economically and health-wise. And I want some of our talented people to come to us and to come to other sports, rather than go to banks, rather than go to a whole range of other professions or careers that were seen as increasingly valid, because you can't be what you can't see. There were some issues around the access and flexibility, childcare, etc., recruitment and traction, often recruiting roles, recruiting committees are made up or comprised of men who I guess are more likely than not to recruit or choose someone who sees the world like them, etc. And there's some others I sort of won't go into much, just conscious of time. So the issue then was, we've done the research, we've come up with the themes, we had a hunch of what those themes might be, but they've been given names and they've been described and illustrated, and they're quite revealing for our club and certainly the leadership of the club. But I guess the really uncomfortable part of it is, now what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do to try and to disrupt and challenge the status quo, to improve our business and hopefully get that performance dividend we're seeking. So we come up with a whole series of what we call interventions that can be applied across 4 quadrants, 4 different aspects of our business. The first one is cultural. It can be applied to the way our organisation behaves. And some of the initiatives we've come across, and you'll see this slide in a lot more detail in the research report, which is on our website. But so enshrining gender equity into some of the important constituent fundamental documents of the club, such as constitutions, strategic plans, business plans. We have what we call an ethical framework, which talk about gender equity and why they're important to our business. So they're really important as a framing documents for our organisation, which you can look to when you're reconciling behaviour or particular decisions. Training around unconscious bias. As I said before, there's a lot of really good intentioned people who aren't aware how they behave until it's actually called out, or aren't aware of how they think. And I explained one of mine, which was my willingness to want to protect and nurture women from a tough environment, when really it should be me and my thinking about maybe the environment should change. Culture of the visibility and voice of women, making sure that we do have some female leaders at the club. We do have 2 in our executive. They do some really credible stuff. They are customer facing, and maybe we should be using forums like this example and for other sort of club related forums to really promote and present what they do. As far as our business, the way our results are enabled, we've turned our recruitment process on its head. We've come up with a series of actual targets for the composition of our executive team, for the composition of our board. Our board's made a commitment to have female representation consistent with ASX guidelines, which I think is 40%. And just on that, we talk about the visibility and voice of women. It is so pleasing to have a female president. That's the first president in the history of VFL AFL football, and she's actually been on our board for 8 years. And she's not there just because she's a woman, and she came on board after this project was well underway. She's there because she's an eminent public company director, which can add enormous value to the operation of a board. So structurally, the way the organisation operates, we've maternity leave and paid parental leave, and we looking at the way we structure work and increase flexibility, and given the we really do work around the clock and weekends, and we're creating what we call hot jobs. So we've actually set aside a couple of jobs that will be filled, but they can only be filled by women. And some might say, well, that's positive discrimination, or I say it's positive, and I say it's intervention. And these jobs, these hot jobs, are being created in what we call the hard parts of our business, which is the football side. And for a lot of people, that's seen as impenetrable, the performance of football side. So we'll see how that goes. And finally, we've come up with a series of, interventions and goals around leadership, and the way we talk about this, the way we normalise the discourse. Some of the commitments. I mean, the fact we've made these public commitments and make us feel so uneasy, I guess, a form of leadership in itself. But also, in the last probably 3 months, we've been working on establishing what we call a Male Champions of Change program, which is a really, really fascinating program. It was established by Liz Broderick, who is the Sex Discrimination Commissioner, and recognising that men in business needed to drive change given the significant roles they had. She set up a Male Champions of Change program for corporate Australia. So I think 23 of the 30 biggest companies by market cap in this country have come together to make a series of commitments around this very subject, around increasing the levels of female and senior leadership, about sharing their experiences around what have worked and what hasn't worked, about publishing and reporting, about holding each other accountable. And these guys are fierce competitors. I mean, you've got Mike Smith from ANZ, Ian Narev from Commonwealth Bank, and you've got Grant O'Brien for Woolies and Richard Goyder from Wesfarmers. I mean, they fight tooth and nail for market share, but they can come together over something, I think, which they all have a really strong mutual interest to. It's really inspiring what they've done. we decided to, I guess, adopt a similar program under the auspices of the Sex Discrimination Commissioner, Liz Broderick. We've called it Male Championship Change for Elite Sport. And for those who might have read Fairfax Media this morning, there's a big story in the Fin Review and the Age. And so basically we've got a handful of CEOs from AFL clubs, from rugby league clubs, Broncos and the Rabbitohs, from Soccer Australia, Melbourne Victory, sorry. We've got the CEO of Tennis Australia, the CEO of Swimming Australia. I believe Mark was here this morning speaking. He's been a really valuable contributor. Basketball Australia. So between us, we have responsibility for thousands of participants and millions of fans, passionate fans that follow our sports very, very closely. So we're really excited, I guess, by the opportunity to normalise the discourse and to generate traction without a community. So there's a photo, I think, just from today's papers. There's a few obviously not there, but all the sports were represented. It's Grant O'Brien in the middle at the back, who's the CEO of Woolworths. And we're really excited by the opportunity to, I guess, to lead and the way change is driven in this space. So, as I said before, this is publicly available, the report. I'd really encourage you to read it. It is quite confronting. We haven't got all the answers, but we're a curious club, and we want to get the answers. And ultimately, it's because we want to be a better organisation. And just on that point, this is more than just about fairness and equity, although they're very important considerations. This is about making us a better business, and making sport, I guess, operate more effectively around the country. So thanks for your time, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about something I consider pretty important, and happy to take a few questions. Thank you.